Today, I want to look at three questions. Why did this war between the United States and Iran start? How will this war end? And what will happen after this war ends? And to answer these three questions, we need to discuss the nature and structure of our reality. And the first thing you need to understand, which is very hard, is that our world is a hallucination. It's a collective fantasy, all right? So to understand this idea, let's look at Plato's allegory of the cave, okay? Plato's allegory of the cave. And so in this cave, we're deep inside the earth and it's dark. There's some light coming in, but not much. And we're all chained in a line together, okay? And there's about 1 million of us. We're on the floor and we're chained to the ground. And we can't really move. We can't get up, we can't move around. Even our necks are shackled. So we can't turn around and see the world around us. Okay, so there's about 1 million of us all sitting down and staring at a wall together, okay? And this wall is blank. Behind us is great fire. And there are people around this fire, okay? We don't know who they are, but they are free to move around. And what they do is this: they take puppets, and then they reflect the puppets onto the wall, creating shadows. And we're mesmerized by these shadows, because before we're staring at a blank wall, and now there are these moving shadows. And we think these shadows are real because we don't know any better. So we give them names. Okay, we give them names, and we create a language in order to tell stories about these shadows. And this becomes really our collective reality, okay? So another way of saying this is that reality is a collective conscious, which is really a hallucination. Okay? All right. So there's certain things about this reality that we need to keep in mind. Okay? So first of all, what's really important to understand is that what creates this reality is our conscious, our imagination, our perception. Not anyone else, us, okay? So in other words, the wealth in the society is our consciousness. The amount of thought we put into something. And so let me give you an example. Let's just say that I were to ask you to make a vase to sell on the marketplace, okay? While you're making this vase, if you are listening to music, if you are chatting with a friend, if you're not fully conscious and focused and attentive about making this vase, it won't be very good. But if you are completely focused on creating the most beautiful vase you can, and you're not distracted by anything, then this vase will be beautiful and therefore more valuable in the marketplace. Okay? So in other words, it is our conscious attention that creates wealth in this world. And it is really money or capital that extracts and stores our consciousness and turns it into wealth. All right? So that's a really important concept that most people don't understand, but you need to understand this if we are to understand the nature of reality itself. Okay, so that's the first thing you need to understand. This reality is structured to extract our consciousness in order to create wealth for the elite, for these people. Okay, and historically, there have been different mechanisms that you can use in order to extract and store wealth. All right, so you have maybe religion, okay? And so think of pyramids, right? Because pyramids in Egypt are able to focus your attention and motivate you to do certain actions, okay? To engage in religious worship. but really any temples. So that's one form of capital. Another form of capital, of course, is the idea of stories. Homer, right? Homer is the father of Greek civilization because he wrote the Iliad and the Odyssey, which is able to focus people's attention and drive them to great things. Then you, of course, in today's world, you have the Bible. And the main mechanism to extract and store wealth in today's world, of course, is the US dollar. Now, but there's another force that's being created in order to replace the US dollar, and this is called artificial intelligence. All right, so what we'll discuss later on is that there's actually a war going on for the soul of humanity, for the human consciousness between the US dollar, the old world order, and artificial intelligence, the new world order, okay? But I want you to keep this in mind. All right, so that's the first thing I want you to understand. Second thing that I need you to understand is that these people, we don't know who they are, okay? But what we do know is that they don't force us to do anything. There's not enough of them, okay? The way they maintain power is through manipulation and trickery and deception. And we know this because in Plato's allegory of the cave, one day, for whatever reason, one guy decides, you know what? I feel as though this is not the real world. I feel as though there's something outside this cave. So he or she starts messing around with the chains and realizes, these aren't chains. These are just like ropes. I can just like get rid of them. And this chain around my neck, it's like a ribbon. I can snap it off. And he doesn't know why he does this, but he does this. He does do this. And when he does this, they don't even care. Like, whatever, man, do whatever you want. And so he releases himself. He's blind because he's been in the dark all his life, but somehow he recognizes that there's this light, okay, outside the cave. And he is compelled to this light. So he's walking, stumbling to this light. And again, they are like watching him. They're like, we don't care. Do whatever you want, man. They don't stop him. He goes out into the light, and now he's outside, and it's pure light, okay? He's left the cave, and at first he's in pain, and he struggles to reorientate himself to this new world, but then eventually he falls in love with this world. It's a beautiful world, and it's like for him, heaven. And he's like, oh my God, this is the real world. The cave is a fake world that we created ourselves. Let me go back there and tell everyone about the truth. And when he goes back, the elite, don't stop him. Like, whatever you want, man, do whatever you want, okay? So they who are in power, you think they have an army, you think they have magic, and you think that they're evil, but really, all their power rests on our belief in their power, okay? They themselves don't have any power except to manipulate us. Okay, that's the second thing you need to understand. Now, the third thing you need to understand is that even though this is a fake world, people don't know this. They think it's real. In fact, they believe it is so real that they are willing to die for it. So that when this man who's seen heaven, who's seen the truth, who's come back to tell everyone, these chains that you have aren't real. We can break free and escape into the real world. If he dares to tell them this, together they will kill him. Okay, do you understand? So in other words, the reality is a hallucination. It's created by us, but we fall in love with it. We're so attached to it psychologically and emotionally that if anyone tells us it's fake, we kill them for it. Okay? So it's these three things I want you to keep in mind as we explore our world. Because our world is actually just Plato's cave. All right, so let me show you how. All right. So, you need a force in order to create this reality, to chain us together, okay? And this force, of course, is called the American Empire. All right, the empire. Basically, just the military. But they themselves don't really want to control this world because they're an army, okay? So what they do is they allow the creation of a financial order, a global financial order, which then constructs the game that we play, okay? And these people then construct the reality that we live in, okay? So this is the global financial order. And what is this global financial order? Well, at the very top is something called the Bank of International Settlements in Basel, Switzerland, okay? The central bank of central banks. Below them is the World Bank, the IMF, International Monetary Fund, which controls the rules of the global financial order. And then below them are something called the central banks, okay? So the Federal Reserve in the United States, the the People's Bank of China in China, okay? The Bank of England in England, okay? So together they create the global financial order. And what is the global financial order? It's just to use the US dollar as a main mechanism of wealth extraction and wealth storage, okay? Really simple. The US dollar. Another way of understanding these people is to think of them as the game masters, okay? The ones above us who's constructed the game and controlling the rules of the game as we play it, okay? The game masters. Okay, so once the game has been created with the rules and incentives, now we can play the game. And this game is called the global economy. All right? So when China trades with the United States, when you go off to Europe on vacation, you're all participating in a game created by the financial order, okay? And the purpose of this this global economy is to have everyone play as much as possible so that wealth can be transferred from the world to the United States, the powers that be, okay? And they do this through two mechanisms. The first is the US dollar. So every time you use the US dollar, you're actually paying a tax to America because America has the power to print as much US dollars as it wants, okay? And the second way that it does this is through something called price hierarchy. Okay, a price hierarchy. So the global economy is divided into tiers. Okay, so resources are considered the cheapest, even though in reality it should be the most expensive, right? Because resources are limited, they're finite. Above resources, of course, is manufacturing. And above manufacturing is knowledge economy. And then the highest is finance. Okay? Basically the game masters. All right, so and as we can see, once with this price hierarchy in place, what we can do now is divide the world according to the specialties, okay? So resource, of course, would be Russia. Russia, the Middle East, the GCC, okay? Saudi Arabia, these places, okay? So these places provide resources. Manufacturing then would be China. Right? Knowledge would be Europe and the Five Eyes, okay? Basically the Anglosphere, Canada, New Zealand, Australia, Britain, and then finance, of course, the United States. Okay? Sorry. The United States. All right, so as you can see, this is a system that benefits the United States and its allies to the detriment of China and Russia. Okay? But this is how the game is structured. Of course, if the United States doesn't like you, what it can do is not allow you to play this game. And these countries, of course, would be North Korea and Iran, among other countries, okay? So China and Russia isn't happy about the system, but at least they get to play. Iran and North Korea are not even allowed to play the game of the global economy. All right? Now, of course, you can't have people believing that, okay, this entire global economy is structured so that the West can steal resources from everyone else, okay? So what you do is you create another layer called the rules-based international order. Okay, multilateral organizations, which includes the UN and the WTO, okay, World Trade Organization, okay? This is called the rules-based international order. But it's really controlled by the empire, okay? So all these are just basically shadows on the wall that the empire is creating, projecting, okay? To fool us into behaving the way the empire wants. All right, So now that you have the system in place, what you need to do is indoctrinate people into believing that the system is fair, just, and good, okay? And you do that through three mechanisms. These three mechanisms, of course, are education, media, and culture, right? What is education? Well, schools, guys, and universities, academia. You think that you go to university to learn knowledge. No, you don't. You go to university to be brainwashed into believing that this system is not just fair, but actually what really makes this system work is the rules-based national order, okay? You don't even think about empire. So that's education. Then of course you have media, which is CNN, BBC, New York Times. Each time you read an article, you think you're receiving news. You're not receiving news. You're being brainwashed into believing that this order is fair, just, and appropriate, okay? A phrase that you'll keep on hearing over and over is rules-based national order. Okay, but it's not a rules-based national order. It's Plato's cave. It's a deception. And the last, of course, is culture, which is Hollywood. And, you know, television shows, sitcoms, okay, things that you absorb every day. There's high culture and there's low culture. All right, so these are three mechanisms in which this order is basically indoctrinated into everyone, so that you don't even know this is a deception, okay? You believe that this is reality itself. And this is all to create values and norms. Okay, just the way you see the world, which allows for the creation of a legal structure. So that if you break the rules, it's not that the elite will come after you. They don't have to come after you because everyone else will come after you. Okay? If you're that guy who discovers that this is all deception, they'll kill you. Okay? Not the elite, but the people around you will kill you because you're breaking their fantasy. Okay? You're destroying their fantasy. All right? So this is a very effective system. The problem, though, is that you need to spread the system, okay? So there's three problems, okay? First of all, you have to protect this system, the status quo. Then you have to spread this system as well, okay? And then you also need to justify this system. And you do that through three transnational systems, three transnational organizations. And these are, okay? First, of course, is intelligence. What is intelligence? Spies, okay? Their job is to infiltrate other nations' elites and co-opt them into this system. That's what their job is, okay? That's what intelligence does. Then you have crime. Crime just engages in the most profitable enterprises, which includes, of course, drugs, human trafficking, and something called money laundering, okay? And this is a way to incentivize the global elite to work together, okay? So that's the first two. And then there's one more mechanism called science. Now you think that science is about pursuing the truth. No, it's not, okay? Science is fundamentally about finding evidence to justify and protect the status quo. Okay, that's why science is fundamentally materialistic. Okay, all right, and what? So so we have to remember, like, this system is trying to create values, right? And these three major values is something called the open society. Okay, what is open society? It's just basically globalization, multiculturalism, DEI, right? Diversity is good. Why is it good? Because it's good. We don't know. It's good. Okay, do you understand? They never provide a reason, but it's always, well, you don't believe it, it means you're a racist, which is bad. Okay, so open society. Second is the idea of privatization. Okay, or what we call neoliberalism or free market, meaning that governments suck at what they do. Therefore, you should allow private entrepreneurs to control everything. Okay, and this idea of neoliberalism. Again, there's not much evidence to support this, but if you don't believe this, it means you're a communist. Okay, which is bad, by the way. And the last thing, of course, is consumerism. Okay? So consumerism is just like, how do you prove your value in life? How do you pursue purpose and meaning in life? Buy things, man! Okay? And then put it on Instagram so that people can like it, you know? That's the value of life, man. Make as much money as possible, and then buy a yacht, get a super hot girlfriend, and then broadcast it on Instagram, and then you're a hero, okay? Of course, what people don't discuss is that this system is making people lonely, miserable, depressed, suicidal. But, well, it's because they're not taking enough drugs, right? If you're depressed, you should take antidepressants, and that will solve the issue, right? Okay. So, because intelligence, crime, and science are above the nation state, okay, you need other mechanisms to actually operate these three things. And so, what allows for the system to work is a collection of elites, okay? And you can break them down into three groups. First, you have transnational capital. So think of, finance, transnational capital. Then you have secret societies, and then you have families, okay? So elite families. All right, and these three organizations themselves are bounded by something called the occult. And we'll discuss this later on, okay? The occult. The occult is just basically hidden, secret knowledge, not available to people, that comes from three places, other places as well, but we'll look at three places, okay? Hermetic philosophy, the Bible, and the Kabbalah, okay? We'll discuss this later on. Don't worry too much about the occult right now. I'll show you what the occult is later on. But this is how the system works. All right, so there's certain questions about this. The first question is, okay, well, if this is true, why is this system separate from this system, right? Why not just say that the occult is the basis of everything, and then you have the elite, and then you have science, intelligence, crime, and then you have the empire, okay? And the reason why is this is really important for you guys to understand. This is the parasite, okay? This is the parasite. It doesn't actually create anything. All it does is suck up value, extract value, okay? And this is the host. So in fact, these are two separate systems, right? This is the host, and this is the parasite. Then your next question would be, okay, let's just assume this is true. What evidence is there that this actually works? Because there should be people that operate this system, right? Well, I will give you some names, okay? All right, so if it is true that this system is the way it is, there should be individuals in place that operate this system, right? Well, I'll give you some names. I'll give you two names. Jeffrey Epstein and Jared Kushner. Okay, and I'll explain who they are as we go along. And these families, how about the Rothschilds? Secret Society, Chabad Lubavitch. All right. And you're like, this is all conspiracy. This can't be true. Well, it's all true. And I will give you the evidence that this is all true later on. By the way, some of you will be like, they're all Jews, man. So why do they say the Jews rule the world? Well, because the evidence that we have implicates these people who are Jewish. But there are other people who are more powerful, who are able to maintain themselves in the shadows, okay? So it's not really fair to say that it's a Jewish conspiracy, okay? I think this explanation, this system is much more complicated than just saying it's all Jews, all right? All right, so now what I want to discuss is the problems of this system, all right? And once you understand the problems of this system, then we can understand why this war in Iran is happening, where it's going, and what this means for the world, okay? So there's certain problems with this system I want you to notice. The first major problem is all this is based on empire, the perception of empire. And what this means is that Everyone has to believe that the American empire is invincible. It cannot be defeated for the system to work, right? Once people start to believe that there are alternatives, that the empire is weak, then the system cannot work. And so therefore, the only solution to this problem is America has to go fight wars for no reason. You understand? It's like being the school bully, right? People pay you money because they think that you're a bully and you are not reasonable. And so to prove that, every now and then you have to go beat up another kid for no reason, okay? You're just smack the kid and everyone's afraid of you. That's America. And this helps us explain all these wars in the Middle East these past 20 years, right? Why did America invade Afghanistan? Why did America invade Iraq? Why did they blow up Syria? Why did they blow up Libya? Why are they attacking Iran? To prove to the world that I'm still the biggest, baddest bully on the block, so you better obey me or I'll come beat you up, okay? All right, so that's the first problem. Second problem is that this system, as you can see, is really, really unfair to a lot of countries. Iran, North Korea, Russia specifically. Okay? So this helps us understand why Russia invaded Ukraine in 2022. Because they're trying to renegotiate this system. Right? Because right now, the system is discriminating against them. It's extracting their resources for very little money. So they want to renegotiate this system. And the way you renegotiate this system is by showing the empire is not so tough, right? But this also shows us why America refuses to surrender Ukraine. This war was lost about 2 years ago, okay? Ukraine has absolutely no chance. Why is this war continuing? Because if the perception that empire is weak, that empire can be defeated, if that perception if people are aware of this entire edifice collapses, okay? Right? People wake up and see it's all shadows on the wall. So America has no choice but to keep on fighting, okay? And this helps us also explain why America invaded Iran, to show Russia, I'm still the biggest, baddest bully. And now we understand what Iran is doing. Iran is now attacking this entire edifice. If you think about it, what Iran recognizes is this. I cannot attack empire directly. Okay, it's too powerful. They have nuclear weapons. I'm not going to attack the education, media, cultural system of America because it's too embedded. I can't attack the UN and WTO because it's all being controlled by America. So the only thing I can attack is what? The global economy, right? That's why they closed out the Strait of Hormuz. Because once they put pressure on the global economy, and that's all interconnected, it destroys the entire edifice. Do you understand? It is a house of cards. You find the weak point, and you hit it so it all collapses. Okay? And that's why Iran is doing what it's doing. And what this also tells us is this. There can be no ceasefire. There can be no truce. There can be no peace. Because both the American empire and Iran are fighting for the nature and structure of reality itself. All right? And the third thing I want you guys to be aware of is this. Remember in Plato's allegory of the cave, they really don't have to do anything because the prisoners themselves want to protect the system. Well, this is true as well. Where if you are in education, media, and culture, and you are at the very top, you are not in power, but you benefit from the system. And therefore, you insist on protecting the system at all costs. And these people, of course, are called the boomers. Okay? Okay, not all of them, okay? But the elite of the boomers, even though they themselves don't have that much power, there's a lot of them, okay? And they will fight, they will make their politicians and the military fight to the death to maintain the illusion of empire, which benefits them. All right? Again, Plato's allegory of the cave. Okay, all right. So, now we can answer all three questions. Why did this war start? Because America had no choice in the matter, okay? It had to defend the illusion that the American empire was invincible. Otherwise, this entire edifice would collapse, okay? When will this war end? This war ends when the global economy is destroyed. Because once the global economy is destroyed, this entire edifice collapses. Okay? And what will happen after this war? Well, a new world will emerge where there are different spheres of influence. Okay? But we'll discuss this later on. But I first introduce to you the big structure of what's going on. Okay? All right. So now what I want to do is I want to go more into the structure of this world. Okay? This. What I want to show you is that Jeffrey Epstein is one of the operators of the system. He works for the Rothschilds, as well as secret societies, as well as transnational capital, and he is embedded in science, crime, and intelligence, okay? And again, the evidence is something called the Epstein files. All right, so let's look at the Epstein files. Okay, so this is Jeffrey Epstein, and this is Donald Trump. All right. Jeffrey Epstein died in 2019 in a federal prison, and he was being charged with many crimes, and the FBI ran an investigation into him. And just recently, the United States, called the Department of Justice, the DOJ, on their website, they released about 3 million documents pertaining to the Epstein investigation, and a lot of these are emails. And what you discover is that he knows everyone who's powerful in the world. So for the longest time, it was believed that Jeffrey Epstein was a Mossad agent, okay? And his job was to lure powerful Americans such as Bill Gates, Bill Clinton, to his island called Epstein Island, where he would film them engage in compromising activities. And then he would blackmail them, okay? And that was, for the longest time, what people understood to be Jeffrey Epstein's role. But then when you look at the emails, what you recognize is that, no, actually, that's what he did for fun. Actually, he made most of his money in arms trafficking and in money laundering. Also, Bill Gates wasn't going to Epstein Island to give Jeffrey Epstein money. Jeffrey Epstein, he went to ask for money. Think about this, okay? Bill Gates, once before the wealthiest man in the world, he was begging Jeff Epstein for money. Think about that. All right? Okay, so let us look at who he is. Okay, this is Peter Thiel. Peter Thiel, as you know, is one of the wealthiest men in America. And Peter Thiel and Jeffrey Epstein are arranging a time to meet. Again, it is not Jeffrey Epstein is seeking these guys out, they're seeking him out, okay? Elon Musk, the wealthiest man in the world, he's actually trying to arrange an appointment with Jeffrey Epstein. All right, why? Because Jeffrey Epstein says, I represent the Rothschilds. All right? Your money is fake. Your money is stock market money. Your money is an illusion. I represent real money, real power, real wealth. Okay? All right? The Rothschilds. All right. So Jeffrey Epstein is very close with the Rothschild family. Why? Well, this is Irina de Rothschild, one of the members of the Rothschild family. Okay? And in December 2018, okay, this is a year before he dies, all right, Jeffrey Epstein sends Aaron de Rothschild an email saying, hey, let me tell you something really funny. Harvard is saying that when Hitler was poor, he lived in a home, a charity home, that was financed by 3 wealthy families who are Jewish. And who are these 3 wealthy families? They're the Rothschilds, right? Then there are the Epsteins, me, and the Gutmans. So these 3 families, Rothschilds, Epsteins, and Gutmans, go way back centuries. All right? So Epstein is a member of one of the most powerful families in the world. All right? Now, Irina de Rothschild responds and says, oh, it's just a conspiracy theory, right? It's just saying that the Jews created Hitler. And Epstein gets angry at him and says, no, it's 100% true, man. Hitler was selling his clothes and already living in a shelter funded by Jews. Epstein, Rothschild, Gutman, no conspiracy. It's really true, okay? The Epsteins, who are we? We're the Vienna bankers. All right? We've been around for the longest time. You Rothschilds think you're powerful? Well, we're powerful too. Okay? All right, let's continue. All right, so the FBI is running an investigation on Jeffrey Epstein, and they created a file on him. And there's a confidential human source, a spy basically, who they recruit to tell them who Jeffrey Epstein is and what his network is. And the FBI is sort of blown away by what they discover, okay? So, Amber, could you help me read, please? Okay, all right. All right, so I want you to start at the top, and it's a bit hard to read, okay, but try your best.
Okay. Jeffrey Epstein was represented by
Alan Dershowitz, okay? Alan Dershowitz is a Harvard professor. He's one of the most powerful men in America, okay? Alan Dershowitz. Keep on going.
CHS remembered Dershowitz tell Alex Ocasio, U.S. Attorney of Southern District of Florida at the time, that Epstein belonged to both U.S. and Allied intelligence services.
Okay, so in 2008, Epstein was arrested in Florida for doing inappropriate behavior, okay? And Alan Dershowitz comes in and says, hey, you can't arrest this guy because he works for intelligence. Actually, the truth of the matter is, intelligence works for him, okay? Keep on going.
CHS shared phone calls between Dershowitz and Epstein during which he/she took notes. After these calls, Mossad would then call Dershowitz to debrief. Epstein was close to the former Prime Minister of Israel, Ehud Barak, and trained as a spy under him. Barak believed Netanyahu was a criminal. Saudi Arabia, Israel, and the United Arab Emirates are allied against Qatar, Turkey, Iran, and Syria.
That's not okay. All right. So here it says that Epstein worked for Mossad. That's not true, okay? All right, so you look at Epstein's life. He actually started his career at Dalton. Dalton is one of the most prestigious elite schools in America. That's where all the most powerful, wealthiest families send their children, okay? He was hired as a teacher. Then he went to work for Bear Stearns, which is a financial firm. And there he learned finance. But then he went to work for Doug Leese. Who is Doug Leese? Doug Leese is an arms trafficker involved with Iran-Contra, okay? So he's one of the biggest global arms traffickers in the world. And then he started to work for Barak, who is the prime minister or the former prime minister of Israel. All right? So you're like, everyone's like, okay, well, it's because he sucks at everything, and that's why he was being moved from one place to another, okay? But another way of saying this is, he's an operative, and he's being trained in how power works by mentors. Does that make sense? Let's just say I have a big company, right? And I'm a chairman. My son is going to inherit this company. How do I train him to be a good boss? Well, I have him work in different departments of the company, and I have mentors train him in these different departments, right? So what is Dalton? Dalton is education, right? What is Bear Stearns? Finance. What is Doug Leese? He is criminal, arms trafficking. And who is Barak? He is intelligence, right? Does that make sense, guys? He's being trained, mentored in the different sectors of power in the world. All right? Keep on reading.
Masha Drakova telephone number is based in Silicon Valley. She has been running a firm called Day One Ventures, which is supposedly an early-stage investment company. She used to be Russian President Vladimir Putin's main contact in the Russian youth movement. CHS and Drakova spoke, but Drakova did not talk at all about technology. Instead, she looked at CHS and said, "You knew Epstein, didn't you?" She said Epstein was a wonderful man.
Okay, so Epstein was connected with Vladimir Putin, okay? All right, let's read the last section. This is the most important, okay?
CHS advised Shabbat.
Okay, Shabbat Lubavitch, right? The organization we talked about. Yes, keep on going.
Shabbat is doing everything they can do to co-opt the Trump presidency. Shabbat is basically state-sanctioned Judaism. It is used by Putin to keep tabs on all the Russo-Jewish oligarchs. On the day Trump was elected president, Ivanka Trump and Jared
Kushner. It
Jared
doesn't say Kushner, but keep on going.
were at the gravesite of Rabbi
Sneerson. Okay. So remember last class, I showed you a video of Netanyahu approaching a rabbi called Rabbi Sneerson and saying, will you give me your blessing? And Sneerson says, yes, I will. And please hurry up and make the Messiah come, okay? So it's all interconnected, okay? Netanyahu, Sneerson, the Trump family, Putin, and it's all connected through Shabbat Lubavitch and Jeffrey Epstein, okay? Keep on going.
who was the most powerful rabbi in the Shabbat network. Jared didn't disclose his stake in Cadre because of its ties to the Russian state, NFI. CHS believed this is the real Russian collusion story. Kushner had moved a lot of Russian investment money around. The FBI should investigate Kushner's family charities to find evidence of corruption and money laundering. Shabbat routinely uses charities to launder money.
Okay, so this is it, guys, okay? This is it. The FBI did an investigation. What they discovered is that Jeffrey Epstein and Jared Kushner are both part of this transnational network that's able to co-opt different nation states, including Russia, including America. And they're all connected to this other transnational religious organization called the Shabbat Lubavitch. And their leader is Rabbi Sneerson. It's all one big network, all right? And let's look at this. Okay, this is a report, a secret government report. What happened was that when Americans went into Afghanistan, the British went in too. And Prince Andrew, who is the brother to the king, asked the British government to investigate investment opportunities in Afghanistan. Okay, so this is the British government. And so whatever they report has to be confidential. It's basically state secret. And this report tells Prince Andrew where's the best place to invest in Afghanistan. And what does Prince Andrew do? He emails it directly to Jeffrey Epstein. Okay? You think these guys work for the government, Prince Andrew. No. They work for Jeffrey Epstein, who works for the Rothschilds. All right. This is Libya. All right. So in February 2011, okay, this is July 2011, America starts bombing Libya, and it seems as though Gaddafi will fall. And already Jeffrey Epstein and his friends are discussing how to make money out of this, right? Because they know that Libya has many assets frozen in American banks. So once a new government comes into place, then this new government will want the money back, right? And Jeffrey Epstein and his friends are like, let's do this for them and get a commission, right? Can you read?
Understood. Remember, there are already 80 billion in frozen funds/assets internationally, of which $32.4 billion is in the US, and it is estimated that the real number is somewhere between 3 to 4 times this number in sovereign, stolen, and misappropriated assets. So if we can identify/recover 5% to 10% of these monies and receive 10% to 25% as compensation, we are talking about billions of dollars. But the real carrot is if we can become their go-to guys, because they plan to spend at least $100 billion next year to rebuild their country and jumpstart the economy. Also, remember, Libya is a rich country, as its population is 2 million less than the city of New York, and it has the 9th largest crude oil and natural gas reserves on the planet, and a literacy rate of almost 80%.
Okay, do you guys understand what's happening, okay? These are parasites. They look at geopolitics and they're like, how can we take advantage of geopolitical events to make the most money for ourselves? All right? And you're like, okay, well, Jeffrey Epstein is gone. Oh, sorry, okay, all right. So something else I want to discuss with you is Bitcoin, okay? So this is a Guardian article that shows that Jeffrey Epstein was helping to finance the development of Bitcoin, all right? But not only that, I want to show you this picture. This happened in 2004 at Harvard, okay? This is Larry Summers, who is the president of Harvard University. This is Steven Pinker, one of Harvard's most famous scholars. And this guy is Jeffrey Epstein, all right? Who's paying for this dinner? Probably Jeffrey Epstein. And you're like, what is happening here? And again, I keep on telling you guys this. You think academia is about pursuing truth, doing research. No, it's not. It's about protecting and justifying the status quo. It's about providing a network for powerful people to meet together and to work together. Okay? And the Jeffrey Epstein files reveals this, how corrupt academia and science are. It's all part of this huge transnational network, this grand alliance between science, crime, and intelligence in order to extract as much value from the world as possible, okay? These are parasites. And you're like, okay, how about Jared Kushner? Well, Jared Kushner's doing the same thing, guys, okay? This is Jared Kushner, right? Who's this guy? Vladimir Putin. What are they doing? They're discussing peace in Ukraine. Because what Jared Kushner is saying to Putin is, listen, I can negotiate, okay, I'm speculating, okay? I don't know, okay? But I imagine he's a real estate developer, so he's saying to Putin, hey, after this peace treaty happens between Ukraine and Russia, Ukraine will need to be redeveloped. So you should give opportunities to, you know, okay? Okay, so that's Russia. Then you go to Iran. This is Jared Kushner, Steve Witkoff, and the Omani foreign minister. And before the attack against Iran happened, there were these peace negotiations between the Iranians and Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff, who represent the Americans. So this guy, Steve Witkoff, during the negotiations, went on TV and said that, oh, the Iranians are trying to they're trying to enrich weapons-grade uranium as soon as possible, okay? So what Steve Witkoff is doing is he's sabotaging the peace negotiations. These guys are negotiating with the Iranians not to create a peace treaty, but to create a justification for war. All right? Oh, and also, this is Jared Kushner. Sorry. Oh, crap. All right. This is Jared Kushner, this is Steve Witkoff, and this is Benjamin Netanyahu. What are they doing? They're discussing peace in Gaza. Why? Because after peace happens in Gaza, Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner are going to lead a real estate team to develop Gaza into these luxury villas, guys. Okay? So this is how the world works. All right? But again, there's a problem with the system, all right? So, okay, well, this is the way the world works. Now, the question then is, okay, if this is the way the world works, and Jeffrey Epstein, Jared Kushner, and others are the real power in the world, and they represent the elite, how do we know this? Why is the Epstein files out in the government website, right? Why is it that you can go on the Department of Justice and look at all these things? Well, because there's a problem with this system. And it's this. This system is a parasite, right? So they are extracting value from the nation state. So other elites are asking themselves, why can they be the parasites, but not us, right? So what's happening is a civil war between the elite, these people, and the counter-elite. People who want to take the position and become the parasites. Okay, and that's why we're seeing this conflict right now emerge in America. All right? Any questions, guys? Any questions? All right, so we will discuss this civil conflict, this civil war, next class. Last night, there was a major escalation in this war. So the Israelis have bombed the Iranian oil fields. And in response, the Iranians now are attacking the energy infrastructure of the GCC. Okay, so let's have a look at what this attack looks like. This is Qatar. Okay, so Qatar provides 20% of the world's LNG, and this is a major escalation. And again, as I pointed out last class, the entire strategy of Iran is to destroy the global economy, okay? And this is how it will do so. It also attacked Tel Aviv in response for the assassination of their de facto leader, Ali Larijani, okay? So this is what the attack looks like. As you can see from this picture, this is a cluster warhead, and it is impossible for air defense to stop this. So Tel Aviv is getting pummeled. We don't have footage because it's being censored right now. And you would think that the Israelis would want this war to end as soon as possible because Tel Aviv and other cities are getting destroyed in this war. And again, there's really no way for the Israelis to defend themselves against Iranian ballistic missiles. But unfortunately, there are many Israelis who are very happy about all this destruction. All right? And so this is one of the more influential rabbis in Jerusalem. He's talking in Hebrew, but what he's saying is that this war of destruction, it will bring about the return of the coming of the Messiah. And it will happen on Thursday, which is today. Okay? So they are not at all saddened by what is happening. In fact, they are quite animated. They're very excited about what's happening. So again, you cannot look at this war from a geopolitical lens. You have to look at it from an eschatological perspective. All right? So let us look at where we are in the war so far. And as you can see, it is a regional war, and both sides are seeking maximalist objectives. And what this means is the United States and Israel wants to destroy Israel, especially its capacity to be a nation state. And so right now, the Americans and Israelis are attacking their leadership, decapitating their leadership, as well as targeting their economy. And later on, as this war progresses and escalates, they will start to target civilian critical infrastructure, including water. Okay? And it's already happening. They also want to have a divide and rule strategy where they want to provoke ethnic conflict in Iran and divide Iran up into ethnic enclaves. And this is what we call balkanization. The Iranians, on the other hand, want to destroy the entire global economy. And you do that by attacking the energy infrastructure of the GCC. Because again, the entire basis of the global economy is cheap energy. Okay? So as this war progresses, you will notice certain things. Right? So eventually, the Americans will have no choice but to launch a ground invasion. And one possible attack vector is here, which is Karg Island. This is where Iran stores about 9% of its oil for export. And so the idea is that if you take Karg Island, you will destroy the Iranian economy and thus its capacity to sustain this war. The problem with Karg Island is that it's easy to take, but it's hard to defend because of the coastline, right? In which case, you have to also take the coastline. But then you deal with the Zagros Mountains, And so you have to expand outwards. Okay, so this is what we call mission creep, where you cannot justify the war. So what you do is you put in some soldiers, and then the mission creep becomes just justification for the war. Okay, so that's one thing to spot as you read the news. Karg Island will be a flashpoint. Another flashpoint will be Saudi Arabia, because right now the Iranians are attacking Saudi Arabia. Now, what Saudi Arabia can do is declare war on Iran. And this is important because Saudi Arabia has a mutual defense pact with Pakistan, so that if any are attacked, the other is obligated to come to each other's defense. Okay? This is important because, as you can see, Pakistan opens up the eastern front. Okay? So it's possible the Americans can attack from the east. The other thing that's important is that Pakistan has nuclear weapons. And it is possible nuclear weapons are used. I strongly believe tactical nuclear weapons will not be used, okay? But once Pakistan is in the war, nuclear warheads are now at play, okay? Another thing to watch is how this war expands elsewhere, okay? Because when the time is appropriate, what will happen is that the Iranians will activate their proxies, the Houthis, and they will close off another critical choke point. Okay, so now what's going to happen is that there'll be two critical maritime choke points that are closed off, thus isolating the GCC and thus cutting off the world's access to cheap energy. And when they do that, we can expect global retaliation and other forces will have to come in to secure cheap energy. Okay, it is possible the South Koreans, the Japanese are forced into this war because they are so dependent on GCC energy. All right? All right. So these are things that we will look for in the next few weeks. Something else that is creating attention online is people are speculating that Benjamin Netanyahu is dead. And the reason why is that he's not been seen in a public setting for many days. There have been cabinet meetings, and Netanyahu usually chairs them, and he's not there, okay? The other thing is that there are fake AI videos of him giving speeches, and it's pretty blatant these are fake. So people are speculating that he is dead, and they're trying to cover it up. This is a picture of him visiting a cafe in Jerusalem to prove he's not dead. The problem is that this cafe is in a mountain, and it will take him about like 50 minutes to drive there. So why does he go there? Why doesn't he just have a cabinet meeting or get on the phone with Donald Trump to prove he's still alive? All right? So, but I personally don't believe he is dead. He could be hiding somewhere, or he could be injured. What we do know is that the Iranians are killing a lot of senior Israeli officials, including the head of Mossad, their spy agency. And Netanyahu's residence was also targeted in Tel Aviv. So that's a really interesting question. How are the Iranians able to target so many of the top leadership of the Israelis, okay? But not only that, but this is Ali Larijani, and he is the de facto head of the Iran war effort. And he was assassinated yesterday or 2 days ago. And the Iranians have confirmed this, okay? So he is confirmed to be dead. And analysts are extremely worried about this because he is a very pragmatic person. And so you can negotiate with him, right? So once this war reaches a certain point where both sides are exhausted, then it is possible to approach him and say, you know what, let's just negotiate a ceasefire. And he'd be willing to because he's very experienced. He's also very influential, so he's able to bring together the different factions of the Iranian government and negotiate a ceasefire. With him dead, it is now almost impossible to foresee a ceasefire. Okay? So let's discuss why you really don't want to do this sort of stuff. You don't really want to kill other nations' leaders, okay? And so let's just use an analogy. Let's imagine in the streets, there are two gangs at war with each other, okay? Gang A and Gang B. Okay, Gang A, Gang B. And if you look at gangs, they are structured as hierarchies, okay? But there's a lot of autonomy among the different sections, okay? And what holds the gangs together, of course, is the leader. So when these two gangs go to war, what they try to avoid is killing each other's leader. Why? Because a war is often used to achieve certain political objectives, right? And so the point isn't to kill everyone. The point is to negotiate a treaty that is most beneficial to you. And you do that by negotiating with each other's leaders, okay? Because they have the authority to implement the treaty. That's the first reason. The second reason is if you kill the leader, then more people, there'll be a competition to replace the leader, right? And during a gang war, the person who is most violent, the most extreme, will often become the new leader, okay? So by killing this leader, not only do you cause conflict among the gang, but you also cause a massive escalation in the conflict between these two gangs, and there's really no way out. That is why historically you do not target other nations' leaders, because then there's no off-ramp. Okay? So by targeting Larijani, the Israelis and the Americans have ensured that there will be no off-ramp now. This war we fought to the bitter end. And unfortunately, as we discussed previously, that is the objective here. The Israelis and the Americans are interested in maximalist aims to destroy Iran permanently. Okay? And the Iranians are also maximalists in that they want to destroy the global economy permanently in order to restructure reality itself. All right, okay. So this leaves us with three major questions that I want to look at today, okay? The first big question is, how are these leaders dying? It's not that easy to kill a leader, right? Because he's protected by security. And usually there are two ways to figure out where the leader is, okay? There's human intelligence, called HUMINT, and there's signal intelligence, called SIGINT. Okay? Human intelligence, signal intelligence. Signal intelligence just means electronic eavesdropping, where I listen in on your telephone calls, where I track your IP address, okay? And the Israelis and Americans are obviously very sophisticated in that. And the Americans and the Israelis are saying that we are using electronic surveillance in order to track these people down. I don't think that's convincing. I think the most important source, the most reliable source of information is human intelligence, having spies embedded in local networks to spot for you where they are, okay? That's the best way to figure out where they are. So then this raises the question, how are the Israelis and the Americans getting this human intelligence, okay? All right, that's the first question we want to look at. How are these leaders dying? Second question is like, why are they dying? Like, what's the point of killing them, right? Because once they die, they can just be replaced, and they're often replaced by a more extreme individual, okay? So that's the second question we want to look at. And the third question we want to look at is, what does this mean for the war and the world? Okay? What do these decapitation strikes ultimately mean for how this war will progress and how this will affect the world in general, okay? All right, so those are the three big questions I want to look at. So to answer these three questions, I want to introduce a new idea to you, okay? It's called the law of proximity. The law of proximity The idea is this. Whenever you play a game, you're not just playing one game. You're playing many, many different games. And the game that you choose to play is the one that is most proximate to you, the one that is most close to you. And that impacts your decision making the most. Okay, so that's a law of proximity. So let me explain to you what this means using an analogy, okay? Let's just use your life. You are playing actually multiple games every single day, all right? So let's examine this. The first game you play, of course, is the family game, right? So you might have parents and you have siblings, okay? And the game you're playing, of course, is to win attention from your parents. And to do so, depending on who your siblings are, you might use different strategies, including doing well in school or being a pain in the ass. Unfortunately, my kids choose to be a pain in the ass, okay? Yes. The parents are playing another game, which is social prestige, right? So they're competing against other parents to have the best family possible, all right? So, and then not only do you play a game at home, but you also play games at school, right? Right? So when you go to school, you're competing against your classmates for attention and popularity, but you're also playing a game in the school to get the best grades so that you can get into a good college, right? Then you go to work, where you're competing in order to win the favor of your boss and to be popular among your colleagues. Then you play a city game where you live in Beijing and you want Beijing to be better than maybe Shanghai or Shenzhen, okay? And then you play a game of maybe a nation where you want China to be stronger than Japan, okay? So as you can see, every single day you're playing multiple games, even though you may not recognize it. And again, what's important is the game that is most important to you is the game which you are most close to, right? The one that you can see in front of you. Okay, does that make sense? Okay, but this is also true for nations as well, where we think that the game is between nations. But really, the game is within nations. And the conflict within nations is the one conflict that determines how nations behave against each other. All right, so today what we will do is we will look at 3 examples of this, okay? We will look at the civil conflicts in America, in Israel, and in Iran to figure out why they behave the way they do, and then figure out how this war will progress. Okay, so clearly there is a civil conflict right now in America. Okay, you have the Democrats and you have the Republicans. Now what's odd is that even though these 2 different political parties are at war with each other, they both support the war because their calculus is different. Okay, so why do the Democrats support this war? Well, it's because they believe that this war will be extremely unpopular in America, which will allow the Democrats to dominate in the midterms in November and then win the presidential election in 2028. And they believe that this war will be so unpopular, it will destroy Donald Trump and allow the Democrats to rule forever. It will basically destroy the Republican Party. All right? And so that is your strategy. And if you think about it, it actually makes a lot of sense. The Republicans have a different strategy, which is this war may be unpopular, and this war may make America lose, but it's okay. Why? Because in a time of war, the president has something called the Emergency Powers Act, okay? Emergency powers. Emergency powers allows the president to essentially suspend the Constitution and to suspend or delay elections. Also, the the Republicans want to pass something called Safe America Act. Okay? The Safe America Act, which means that if you are a voter, you must present ID in order to vote. And you think that this is, well, reasonable, but historically, the idea of checking ID is a way to discriminate against minorities, right? To have police officers there to scare minorities. And that's traditionally how racism was enforced in America. Okay? So in other words, the Republicans have many different strategies of either cheating or manipulating the elections. They could also, I have to say this, but if the war's going really badly, what they will do is call a national draft and cancel the elections, okay? All right? So these are two different strategies going on. But as you can see, this is not really about America defeating Iran. This is really about the Democrats or Republicans trying to obtain power and keep it, okay? All right. But what's important for us to understand is that it's not just about the Democrats and Republicans at war with each other. There's actually a much deeper divide in America, okay? And this divide is a conflict between the elite and the counter-elite. Remember how we introduced the idea of elite overproduction, right? This is the Peter Turchin idea. And he argues that what leads to civil war is that you have too many elite who want to be the ones in power. Power is a zero-sum game, and therefore, when you have elite overproduction, they have to go to war against each other in order to have the power. Okay? And so, what's going on? Who are the elite and who's the counter-elite? Well, I mean, to put it very simply, the Democrats represent the elite, and the Republicans represent the counter-elite, okay? So, basically the elite is the empire. And counter-elite is MAGA, which is America First. And so they have two different ideals for America. The empire is to maintain the current global order, right? And MAGA is to retreat back into the Western Hemisphere and focus on Americans' core national interests. Right. They're also divided into finance and AI. Okay? So in other words, Wall Street are the main backers of the current elite, and then Silicon Valley are the main backers of the counter elite. Okay? So these people are interested in maintaining the status quo. They are interested in a revolution, right? And so this is the main divide in America that will eventually lead to a civil war, like an actual civil war, okay? But right now, they're fighting over foreign policy. So I will discuss this more in the future, okay? But I present to you now. So let me give you a concrete example of why they're fighting. Why are people in finance fighting with people in AI? And there's a very good reason. Because if you're able to control Washington, D.C., if you're able to control the levers of government, you're able to make a lot of money for yourself, okay? So let's look at this concretely. Okay, what people don't really understand is that both finance and AI are bubbles that will burst. They're parasites, okay? So finance is a parasite because there's something called a private credit bubble, right? Private credit bubble, the idea of private credit is very simple. Rather than banks issuing loans to companies, companies privately issue loans to other companies. And you would think that these companies would be very careful with who they lend to and how much they lend to, right? That's not true though, okay? Why? Because in 2008, these banks destroy the global economy, and the American government bailed them out. Right? They suffered no consequences. This idea of moral hazard. If you do not suffer consequences for your stupidity, well, you're just going to be more stupid in the future. Okay? So these companies believe that we control Washington, D.C., therefore we can be as risky and stupid as we want. So they're giving out lots and lots of silly loans to companies because they collect a fee for these loans, right? And then when these loans don't actually work out, meaning the companies go bankrupt, what they do is they say, oh, we'll lend you some more money to keep afloat, okay? So now this problem has reached about $2 trillion. And so they think that, okay, well, worst case scenario, the government will bail us out if we all go bankrupt because we're too big to fail. And all our friends are in government. Okay? That's their mentality. And in 2008, that worked. But there's a problem today, which is there's also another group that's doing the same crap, okay? And it's called the AI bubble. All right, so if you look at AI bubble, you got companies like Microsoft, OpenAI, Oracle, NVIDIA, okay, lots and lots of different companies. And the way they operate is they just lend money to each other, okay? It's like, I give you $1 billion, then you give me $1 billion, and now we have $2 billion. Okay? It's a circle jerk. And it's getting a lot of money from the GCC and other investors. The problem, of course, is what's happening in the war, right? So if the GCC can no longer put more money into this bubble, then eventually this bubble will have to burst. But they're like, that's okay. Why? Because we control Trump. We control the White House. We are the stock market. Therefore, Washington, D.C. will bail us out. Okay? So that's the war going on, where you have two parasitic forces, the finance sector and the tech sector, and they are all looking for government bailouts when their bubble bursts. But the government doesn't have infinite money. It can only bail out one side, right? So they're going to fight over with the government. They're going to fight over who bails who out, okay? If the Democrats can win the House and the presidency into 2028, then the private credit people will get bailed out. But if Trump and his people stay in power in 2028, then the AI people will get bailed out, okay? So that's the civil war going on in America right now. We'll discuss this more later in the future, but I just present to you right now, okay? And then, of course, you have the Israelis, Israel. People don't really appreciate how divided Israel is. This is about 2020 when you have like 1 million people in Tel Aviv calling for the resignation, the impeachment, the jailing of Prime Minister Netanyahu. Because Netanyahu, like most Israeli politicians, is very corrupt. Okay? And to avoid going to jail, Netanyahu proposed changing the judiciary, changing the laws. And so there's these massive protests against Netanyahu. And at this point in Israel, it seemed as though Netanyahu was going to fall from power and go to jail for the rest of his life. But then, of course, October 7th happened. Okay? October 7th happened. And then Israel is now in permanent war that gives him emergency powers. Okay? All right. To give you a sense of how divided Israel is, let's look at the Knesset, which is their parliament. Guys, this is a lot of political parties. And as you can see, none of them are dominant. Okay? The biggest, Likud, which is Netanyahu party, it has about 30 members. But it cannot rule by itself, therefore it has to join with other political parties. Okay? It has to be a coalition. But you look at its enemies. Well, its enemies also have a lot. So it seems as though Israel is an extremely divided society, and it is. Okay? People don't really appreciate this. You know, a lot of people talk about a Jewish global conspiracy. What people don't really understand is the Jewish people have never, ever gotten along. So you go back to the time of Jesus, and there were like 3 major factions in Jerusalem. They were the Sadducees, there were the Pharisees, and the Essenes. They all hated each other. In the year 70, the Romans sent a huge army to destroy Jerusalem. Okay? And you would think at this time, the people in Jerusalem would get together and unite and defend Jerusalem because otherwise they'd all be killed. Well, they didn't get together, okay? And the Romans destroyed Jerusalem and burned down their second temple and massacred a lot of Jews. So the Jews have always had this problem where they're extremely creative and intellectual, but that just leads to massive infighting, okay? All right. So these are the leaders of the different political parties of Israel. And again, I hate to say this, but like they really hate each other. It's not, like a show. They generally hate each other. And that's why Israel has been politically been so dysfunctional these past few decades. Okay? All right. So now I want to discuss where the major conflict in Israel is. Okay, so I would say there's like the two major conflicts is represented by Tel Aviv and Jerusalem. These are two cities in Israel, and they are the two major cities of Israel, and they represent two different centers of gravity, two different visions for Israel. Tel Aviv is democratic. Jerusalem is a theocracy, meaning it's religious. Okay? Tel Aviv is open, meaning it actually has a lot of homosexuals, right? And you can imagine people in Jerusalem aren't happy about this, so they're very conservative. Okay, cosmopolitan tradition. All right, so these are two vastly different visions for Israel, where Tel Aviv is this open, democratic, modern, progressive city. Lots of homosexuals, lots of open ideas, very secular, very outward-looking, very Western. Jerusalem is the complete opposite, okay? Very religious, very conservative. And they hate each other. And the fact that Tel Aviv is getting destroyed right now in this war, people in Jerusalem are actually okay with this, okay? They're not like, oh my God, they're killing Israel. No. Tel Aviv is the great Satan. Let's just destroy it so that we can build a theocracy. Okay, all right. So let's look closely at where they disagree, okay? So Israel is the kingdom of David. Okay? But Tel Aviv and Jerusalem perceive David differently. Okay? So for people in Tel Aviv, David was the king when Israel was at the height of its glory, when it was an open, cosmopolitan, creative, innovative empire. And that's what they want Israel to be. The people in Jerusalem see David as a different person. They see David as primarily a poet prophet. And they see David as the exemplar, as the favorite of God, because he redeemed himself and repented himself in the eyes of God, okay? So redemption and repentance. All right. And what they focus on is a story of David, where David is king, and one day he wakes up and finds he's in love with Bathsheba. And so he basically has sex with Bathsheba. Bathsheba gets pregnant, and that's a problem because Bathsheba is married to someone else, Uriah the Hittite. So what does David do? David has him killed, okay? And David can do this because he's king. But God finds out and sends the prophet Nathan to tell David, you've sinned. And at first, David refuses to admit that he's in the wrong. But then his child with Bathsheba dies. And David falls into tremendous grief. And every day, he's praying to God for forgiveness. He's asking for redemption. He is repenting. And God forgives him. And in this process, not only does David become a better person, but he becomes united with God. Because now they're best friends. Now they talk every day. And that's what the vision that people in Jerusalem have for Israel. A nation that engages in redemption and repentance. They don't care about this war. They don't care about Iran. They don't care about the United States. They don't care about the Greater Israel Project. They care about the Jews finding God again and being loyal to God. And that is what will bring peace to the world, okay? That is how they see the world. This is how they perceive things. They believe that in every person, there's a divine soul, okay, that comes from God. But it is trapped in the animal soul, okay? So Tel Aviv is the animal soul. And this is divine soul. All right? So what the animal soul is, you seek material comfort. You want to have sex. You want to get drunk. You want to party. You want to drive a Ferrari. Okay? This is all animal. But inside of you is the divine soul that only seeks to be with God. Okay? And so we are constantly in a struggle between the animal soul and the divine soul. And so from their perspective, Tel Aviv represents the animal soul of Israel. Jerusalem represents the divine soul of Israel. So it's okay if the Iranians destroy Tel Aviv. Good. Also, they recognize that war is good because if people really want to find God again, they need to suffer. They need to lose everything before they recognize the glory of God, okay? So think of the book of Job. When Job is a character in the Bible who's very wealthy. And so God decides, you know what? Maybe he's only faithful to me because he's very wealthy. So Job loses everything, and this heightens his faith in God. Okay? So that's the vision that these crazy religious zealots have in Jerusalem, which is like, let's destroy Israel so that we can rediscover our love for God, okay? The destruction of Israel will lead to the redemption and repentance of the Israeli people, and therefore peace in this world. The Messiah will finally come. That's why the rabbi was constantly talking about on Thursday the Messiah will come because he feels it's so close. There's so much destruction. There's so much war. So the Messiah must come because now the Jews recognize that only God can save them. Therefore, when you will it, when you pray for the Messiah, when you really want in your heart, that's when the Messiah will come. Okay? But you need to create the conditions when people really want the Messiah. Okay? So that's a civil conflict going on in Israel. And again, these people in Jerusalem, these fanatics, they don't really care if the world is destroyed because this world is fake anyway. Who cares? What matters is the divine soul. Okay? Yeah. You have a question, Vincent?
Like you said that Messiah is coming today, which is Thursday, and like...
No, I didn't say that. I didn't say that. The rabbi said that.
Oh, the rabbi said that like the Messiah is coming today, but like, will the coming of Messiah really affect China and those countries, or is all their personal beliefs?
Okay, listen. I know this is hard for you guys to understand, but China doesn't matter. Okay, only Israel matters. The United States, China, Russia does not matter. The only thing that matters is Israel. Okay, only matters is the people in Israel, the Jews. Their spiritual state will determine the fate of the world. Once the Jews unify with God, then peace and prosperity will come for the rest of the world. Okay? All right? Okay, so now I want to talk about Iran. Okay? This is the political government structure of Iran. Now, one thing to notice is that it's very complicated, okay? It's divided into the religious aspects, okay, assembly of experts, and the secular aspect, which is the government, okay? So it's a government, but the Islamic clerics are at the very top. And this is the dual identity of Iran, okay? And this is their last presidential election. And as you can see, it's a pretty divided country, where people in the middle voted for Jalali, but people in the outskirts voted for Pezeshkian, okay? So there's a lot of conflict in Iran, not just political, religious, but also ethnic as well. All right, so let me explain very quickly what I see is the major divide in Iran, okay? So of course you have the Islamic theocracy, and they're in conflict with secular nationalists. And now, of course, there are these ethnic groups as well. I don't really think the ethnic groups matter that much, okay? What really matters is a conflict between the secular nationalists and the Islamic theocracy. Right? So basically, the rural-urban divide. People who are well-educated and want to see Iran as a secular state that promotes democracy and progress in science versus these religious individuals, okay? Now, what happens is that in a war, you become more extreme. So what will happen is that the Islamic theocracy will transition into Shia eschatology or martyrdom, okay? Where they think that this war is about having that 12th Imam, Mahdi, who is basically the Messiah, return to lead them to war against the great Satan, which is Israel and the United States, okay? So over time, the Islamists will become much more radical. This will force the secular nationalists to also become much more radical as well. So they will become Persian exceptionists, okay? And what this means is that Persian exceptionalism, which just means that Persia is the greatest civilization in human history, and therefore it is worth dying for. It is worth fighting for. The survival of the Persian civilization is much more important than the survival of the Iranian state. Okay? So the great question for the Iranians is, are they able to reconcile the differences between these two strands of the culture? Or will this lead to civil war in Iran, okay? We are seeing civil war in Israel, we're seeing civil war in America. Iran cannot afford to fight a civil war at this time because they're being bombarded by two very powerful nations, the Israel and America, okay? But unfortunately, the law of proximity teaches us that people are much more interested in their own internal conflict than the outside global conflict, okay? And so this understanding now gives us, helps us answer the three big questions of today, right? How are these leaders getting killed? Why are they getting killed? And what will this mean for the rest of the world, okay? And so the first two questions, how are they getting killed? Why are they getting killed? They're getting killed because of these civil conflicts within these nations, okay? These different factions are providing intelligence to their enemies in order to limit their internal enemies, right? That's, again, I don't have evidence, but I think according to game theory, that's the best explanation for how these leaders are getting killed. Because again, it's not that easy as a foreign nation to identify the location precisely of that leader, okay? And what we're seeing in this war is both the Iranians and the Israelis are doing a very excellent job of killing each other's leaders. And that's not actually common, right? So I think this civil conflict within these nations offers the best guide, the best understanding of why this is happening, okay? Now, the third question is, where's the world going? As you can see from these conflicts, it seems as though the world can only become much more theocratic in the end, okay? So what's happening is, at the end of the day, this war in Iran, in the Middle East, it's really a war between two different competing visions of the world. Okay? You have the global secular financial order, okay? And this is the world that we live in today. And they're fighting against a nationalist theocracy, theocratic order. All right? So this is what we can expect over the next 5 to 10 years, where Iran becomes much more theocratic, and extreme, and nationalistic. Israel abandons democracy and embraces theocracy. America will also abandon democracy and embrace theocracy, because that is the general trend of the world. Okay? All right? Okay, so what I want to do next class is discuss how the world will change next 5 to 10 years. All right? Okay, any questions? Okay?
You mentioned that Israel have two divided parts, and one represents the animal soul and the other represents the divine soul. Like I can substitute this logic to a single person. Like people are always struggled with like identify or not identify, like separating the divine soul and pursue the divine soul, but they cannot get rid of the animal soul. Is there a way where we can only struggle as in our lives?
Okay, so first of all, it's important to understand that this is how religious people in Israel frame the conflict in Israel, okay? A conflict between the animal soul and the divine soul. The people in Tel Aviv would frame the debate as one between progress and tradition, right? Going forward or staying backward, right? So that is, so people in Tel Aviv and Jerusalem would see this in a different way. But as you point out, there's some validity to this idea that we're all struggle between the animal soul and the divine soul. And I would say that for the past 20 years, we only have been indulging in the animal soul, okay? We've abandoned the divine soul. And that's why I think people are so desperate for change. And this is what's leading to so much conflict around the world, where the human soul is off balance, okay? Where we are too materialistic and not spiritual enough. And what we know from history is that if a society goes too far in one extreme, they swing back to the other extreme, okay? And that's what we're seeing, where one good outcome, I think, of all this conflict around the world is people start to recognize limitations of money, of materialism, of individualism, and they start to embrace more spirituality, community, family. Because quite honestly, you don't have a choice in the matter, okay? If you're like, I want to buy myself a Gulfstream jet and I want to have like, a huge company, you're gonna be disappointed, okay? As I will show you next class, the world is heading towards an economic depression. Okay, basically a splintering, a rupture in the world. And so you're not going to be able to afford to fly to Maldives for vacation. There won't be avocados in the supermarket. Okay, but all this means is now you have a chance to focus more on introspection, on reflection, on family, on asking yourself, what makes me happy? What gives me meaning and purpose in life? And the answer, of course, is each other. Okay? And maybe this is a good thing. Maybe this is the intention of the universe. Maybe, as the people in Jerusalem would say, this is really the plan of God. Okay? And it's unfortunate that all this war and suffering is happening. But again, what a lot of people who are religious will tell you is, we can only find redemption through suffering and through pain and through tragedy. All right? Okay? Any more questions, guys? Okay, all right, I'll